The first Phoenix Wright trilogy is an amazing set of games. I recently finished Trials and Tribulations, which is the last game in the trilogy, and I thought that I had to rank all the cases for video. But when I got to listing them all, I had a really hard time figuring out a definitive list, and I went back and forth on a lot of my choices. Just know that I really like every case, so even the ones lower on the list were fun to play. And before I get to number 14, I will say there will be story spoilers, and I recommend not watching past here if you haven't played these games yet. I find it hard to put this case at the bottom of the list because all it really tries to do is be a tutorial case. But when I look in retrospective to the other cases, I think this has the most underwhelming plot and characters. It succeeds at being a tutorial for the rest of the game, but that's really all it does. In my opinion, this tutorial barely edges out the first game's one because of the slightly better characters and a deeper plot. Maggie was an okay defendant, but Wellington was actually pretty funny and satisfying to take down. I wasn't a fan of the Amnesia plotline though, and I found it a bit shoehorned in just for an excuse to have another tutorial. When I first played this case, I thought it was really good, but then I found every other case to just be straight up better. I liked the villain, Red White, and at first when Mia died, it was really sad, but when I look back at how much her story played a role in the plot of the whole trilogy, it seems to be a pretty underwhelming death. April May was a good character and I liked the bellboy. There's honestly nothing really bad to say about this case, it's just kinda outclassed by the others that come later. This is definitely one of the most back and forth cases on the list because it does so much right, but I feel that execution of the plot wasn't the greatest they could do. Luke Atmey was a decent villain and I really loved Undelight, and his wife was a good character in context of what was happening. The return of Larry Butts and Adrian Andrews was also a pleasant surprise, but I feel the case has so many plot points that weren't fully realized, and were just a bit anticlimactic. I did enjoy figuring out who Masked Mask really was, though. Yes, even a tutorial case tops both of those main cases. This case manages to have a really good method to having a tutorial in which you play through one of Mia's cases from the past, and your defendant is the wimpy college version of Phoenix Wright himself. I enjoyed seeing these characters from the past, and the villain, Dahlia Hawthorne, seemed standard at first until she got fully realized later in the game. And for a tutorial case, it has a pretty deep plot in which Dahlia purposefully gets in a relationship with Phoenix so she can hide the poison in her necklace that she used on an old prosecutor in a past case. Turnabout Samurai overall has an amazing plot and lots of twists and turns along the way. Most of the characters are really good and they all have good backstories. While all of that sounds like some pretty high highs, this case does have really low lows, in which the assistant is a useless filler character that did nothing, and especially Wendy Oldbag, which was just the biggest annoyance in the whole game. It seems like everywhere you went, she would just be right there waiting for you. And even then, the investigation sequences, and specifically this case, dragged on forever. They stretched it out for way too long, and I feel like it would have been better if it took place over 2 days and not 3. Also, Dave Vasquez's breakdown was pretty underwhelming in which he just kinda gave up. I'm sad putting such a great plot for a case this low, they just messed up too many things with it. I love this case so much for giving us context to so much of the previous questions we had, but also bringing up lots more. This case sees the return of Dahlia from the first game, where you played as Mia, and it does a really good job of establishing her as a main villain. This is not only Mia's first ever trial, but it is also Edgeworth's, and you get to see what he was like in the past. The defendant is Terry Falls, who was already convicted of murder and escaped prison. The main plot is a kidnapping that took place on a bridge that may or may not come in later in the game. You find out at the end of the case that the kidnapping was faked just so Dahlia can steal a $2 million diamond from her own father. Terry was in on it because of his trust in Dahlia. At the end of the trial, Dahlia admits that she was just using Terry, and Terry then commits suicide on the stand in front of everyone in court with the poison bottle necklace because of his promise he made to her. It's even the same necklace that Dahlia gave to Phoenix. This shows the backstory behind there being no poison when Phoenix drank it. Overall, I think this case is the best a case can get without any investigations. The second case in Justice for All is definitely the best second case in the whole trilogy. This is the first time you're introduced to the Magatama, which is a nice addition because it makes the investigations more fun. You're also introduced to Pearl, who is the younger cousin of Maya. The case finds Maya being the accused again after you reunited with her in Kirin Village. The victim is murdered in real time in the closed-off room that only Maya was in to channel the spirit of someone that died in a car crash. This makes it really hard to defend her, but you later figure out that a visitor named Eenie Miney was hiding in a box in the room, and the mother of Pearl, who is in on the plan to also pin the blame on Maya so her own daughter can become the next leader of the village and not Maya. You later learn in an insane plot twist that it is actually Eenie Miney that died in the car crash, and that Eenie Miney was actually Meanie Miney, who stole her identity with plastic surgery. Overall, the plot in this case is great, but I found the investigations to drag at certain points, especially at the Hottie clinic. Here's the opinion that's probably going to give this video a ton of dislikes. I thought that Turnabout Big Top was an amazing case. Generally, this case gets a lot of hate from fans. They usually say that the characters were annoying and that the plot wasn't good, but I couldn't disagree more. I loved every character except I can mostly agree that Mo the Clown was annoying though, especially when cross-examining him. But I love how the plot slowly opened up over time and how every witness played a part in the linear path the victim took. This is also one of the few cases where the investigation parts were actually really fun to play through and were never a drag. The story is that Max Galactica, the main magician at the circus, is accused of murdering the ringmaster in the courtyard. Later find out that Acro, who's an acrobat, was the murderer. But he didn't even mean to murder the ringmaster, he meant to murder Regina, who is the ringmaster's daughter. Regina accidentally murdered Acro's brother a while ago, so Acro had a clear motive for attempting to murder her. This case is really unique because of the whole accidental murder plotline, and all of the colorful characters that played a part in it. There's so many little sub-mysteries that you have to solve that seem pointless at first, but then all make sense in the grand scheme of things at the end. Acro is even the only character that doesn't have a real breakdown, and he just cries and admits the murder was an accident. To be honest, I can rant about this case for a lot longer, but all I'll say is overall, I was super engaged with this case, and I was really surprised when I found out that most people hated it. Recipe for Turnabout is definitely my favorite non-finale case in the whole trilogy. This opinion is also kind of a hot take, but not as much as the Turnabout Big Top one. One of the biggest positives I could say about this case is its pacing. I never wanted to stop playing this case. The story is that a programmer is poisoned in a small French restaurant. Both the witnesses testify that no other person was sitting at the table with them. You later find out that the whole murder was staged after it took place, just so the murderer could create a real witness. It was actually the owner of a loan company known as Furio Tigri who poisoned the coffee, and he managed to make the chef not say anything about the murder because he was in serious debt from him. And that's not even saying much when explaining the plot to this case. It manages to have a really deep and complicated plot while only taking place in a really small, claustrophobic area. All of the characters are really funny, and this case has a unique ending in which you trick the murderer into admitting he did the crime instead of proving it. Overall, this case was extremely satisfying to play through, and is the most well-rounded non-finale case. As good as this case is, I think it has enough stuff wrong with it to put it as the least good finale case. The plot is that Edgeworth, who is the main prosecutor throughout the whole game, is accused of killing someone on a boat in the middle of a lake. He admits he's guilty even though you know he isn't. You later find out that the owner of the boat rental shop did it, named Yanni Yogi. He keeps his real identity secret most of the time because he didn't want you to know he was involved in a case that happened a while ago where Edward's father died in the elevator. At the end of the case, it turns out that Von Karma, who was the perfect prosecutor for this case, was actually the murderer in the past case. It was really unique at the time to have a current case be connected to a previous one. The villain, Von Karma, is an amazing villain and definitely one of the most intimidating. This case has one of the best plots, though I did find that there ended up being a lot of sidetracks with a lot of heart and lyric. One thing I will say about this case is how high its stakes are. It is really tense. Even at the very beginning of the case, Maya is kidnapped by an assassin known as Shelley to kill her. He says that if you don't prove Matt Engarde, who is the defendant, is not guilty, he'll kill Maya. During the first trial, you find out that it was Adrian Andrews that did it and hid the evidence, but she weirdly didn't admit she did it and still says that it was Matt Engarde. While the second investigation is happening, the biggest plot twist of all time happens, and it turns out that Matt Engarde is the person that hired the assassin. This puts you in a weird situation where you want to prove him guilty, but if you do, then Maya will die. At the end, you find out that Matt Engarde actually broke his contract with the assassin, so he's going to be proven not guilty, but he claims that if he's not guilty, he'll be killed. This is definitely the most satisfying ending to a case ever. Matt Engarde is definitely 100% the best single case villain in the whole trilogy. But two negatives I could say about this case though is that its pacing can be a bit all over the place, and that it sees the return of Wendy Oldbag, which I definitely did not appreciate. At least she wasn't as annoying as she was in Turnabout Samurai. Now for the longest and most complicated case, Rise from the Ashes. Probably the most mixed among the community. People either hate it or love it. Me personally, well, you can already tell that it's one of my favorites. I'm not even going to attempt to explain the story to this one because of how long it is, but I will say the positives I found with it. First of all, the characters are all amazing, especially the villain. All the investigations are exciting to play through, except for the first one because barely anything happens in it except for introductions to the main characters. This case even sees the return of Miles Edgeworth, which it was nice seeing him after the events of Turnabout Goodbyes. This case also is boosted by it utilizing the features of the DS for new concepts that only get used in this case. I was in shock at the end of this case, and I feel like everything good about the Ace Attorney series is found in it. Seriously, this by itself is one of the reasons to play through the games. I'm not even going to go in depth into it because this section would be way too long, but this case is basically almost perfection. This is not a big surprise at all. Bridge to the Turnabout is my favorite case in the whole trilogy. Even then, the bridge between this case and the ones before is pretty long. Just like Rise from the Ashes, I'm not going to explain the story to this case, though mostly because I just want you guys to play it for yourself if you haven't already. This case is basically the Avengers endgame of the Phoenix Wright cases. It's the ultimate plot, the ultimate villain. Pretty much all of the all-star Ace Attorney characters are all coming together for this. This case is even packed with fan service and some of the best moments in the whole trilogy. It's basically connected to like 5 previous cases, and those are all ones you've played through. This case alone makes it worth playing through all the games just to reach the perfect conclusion and payoff. This is the easiest number 1 of all time, and look in the dictionary, it's under the word perfection. Okay, so that was my list of Ace Attorney cases. I do know I have a lot of really hot takes in there, but it is all my opinion. I felt like I needed to make a video on this amazing set of games, otherwise I wouldn't be giving justice to them. This is actually the first video I've made with a script, so I actually gave an effort for once. Anyway, that's going to be the end of this video here, and here's a quick tier list of the Ace Attorney characters I made.